We opened our brewery in 1995, and as I got towards opening my pub, I realized that my budget wasn't going to allow me to build the turnkey German copper giant fancy thing. But everything I read in the homebrewing magazines was talking about a turnkey homebrew system that had been made that was kind of head and shoulders above the self-fabricated 3-keg gravity systems that people had been putting together since the 70s. And that ad for the original Brew-Magic was in Zymergy. And so not only did I buy the generation 1.0 Brew-Magic system, but I bought about 30 of these kegs from Sabco that had been converted, that had these lids on them. So a brew day would literally be me getting to the pub at 7 or 8 in the morning. I'd rev up the Sabco. I had a little home mill that I hooked up to a dishwasher motor so that it would automatically mill my grains in, and I'd get some Miles Davis going on the stereo and start doing a bunch of things at once. And the system was really great because you were orchestrating a number of brews throughout the day and you would overlap. So for instance, at the same time that you were boiling in this tank, your first batch of the day, you were mashing in this tank and you were milling the grains for the third batch. So even though the system was tiny, I could get out 3 batches of beer in about 6, 7, 8 hours, depending on what kinds of beers I was brewing. And since then I've gotten to write a book on sort of the history of our company, and it's been really rewarding. Every day or every other day I get an email from somebody who's just read the book and is either excited for their own business in a different industry or thinking of entering the brewing industry. And oftentimes it's people that are just out of college or around the age when I was starting, and they say, well, I don't have a lot of money. Do you have any advice on how I can start? And I've often pointed them towards the Brew-Magic as a way to start. So, pretty much everywhere you look on this system, something's been upgraded and beefed up and become more sterile, sanitary, and production friendly. Well, we started with this system, and we're going to be back to using this system, and it's kind of, it's a wonderful thing for me, especially because we started with this. I know that when I rev this thing back up, I'm going to have the same perspective, the same passion, the same excitement for the first batch of experimental beer that comes off of this as I did when I was 25, didn't know what the hell I was doing, brewing the first batch on the first Sabco in 1995. And so sometimes I'd be embarrassed when commercial brewers would come in and look at my tiny little brewery, but then they'd come and kind of play with it and be like, wow, that's really cool. And what was probably in hindsight the best thing about starting with the Brew-Magic system for our company was the affordability, but B, it allowed us to experiment to a level that no traditional brew pub could. And our motto at Dogfish Head since the day we opened has been off-centered ales for off-centered people. So it was never our goal to brew industrial light lager. We wanted to brew beers that impressed a small amount of people instead of beers that didn't bum out a lot of people. So what that meant is we wanted to experiment with non-traditional ingredients, non-traditional practices. Thankfully, the worst case scenario on an experiment that doesn't go well is 10 gallons of beer that didn't turn out great. So starting at this scale really allowed us to play around with these ingredients with a really low level of risk. It's neat because we do the experimental brewing that we do, and we use so many non-traditional ingredients. Every week I get an email from somebody saying, hey, I grow asparagus and I'd love to see an asparagus beer, or I harvest crystals in Santa Fe and you could do this great karma-centric beer if you had the crystals. But every once in a while an amazing idea comes from somebody like that, and we say, you know what? You can get those beach plums to us by next Thursday, we'll make a beer with that. And now we'll be able to experiment with these weird things that people come to us with a much lower degree of risk, a much lower commitment in ingredient batch cost. Even doing batches on our 5-barrel system, if you screw up, that's at least $1,000 worth of ingredients and man hours and utilities. Here we can do a batch for $30, $40 and get the same degree of repeatability and quality that'll allow us to say, okay, is that recipe worth pursuing and brewing in bigger batches on our bigger systems? In the early days, the words accurate and repeatability were never said in our building. At one point, you know, I took pride when we were really small in the fact that every batch of beer was a little bit different. And so we kind of had the snowball or snowflake philosophy of brewing, which is no two are ever the same. And I love that idea, and that works in a brew pub environment because the customer comes in and they know that beer is made just for serving in that restaurant. However, it was always my aspiration to sell our beer on a national level. But what I kind of forgot about was you can't go into a marketplace using that snowflake philosophy of brewing. And you really do owe it to the consumer who's paying a premium for better beer to give them consistency. So at that point, consistency and repeatability became really important components of our production methods at Dogfish Head. I remember going, you know, working behind the bar and people being like, that pumpkin ale that you made last time had a lot more pumpkin meat character and less of the pumpkin spice character. How'd you do that? And I'd be like, I don't know. And I'd go back in my notes and it just said brewed 3 batches of pumpkin beer that day. And I had no idea what temperatures I was brewing at, how long I was doing my rests for, at what point in the boil I was adding my spices. Now I have the opportunity to have a lot more closer rein on those aspects, particularly through the advances made in the new generation Brew-Magic. The whole computer component of this system is way more robust without being more intricate than the old system. This is really, this is like an assistant brewer that you have working with you. You don't have to worry about getting your notebook wet as you're brewing. You can download all that stuff to computer and review it after the fact. If you overshoot your mash temperature and you're going to screw up your batch, this thing will let you know that. If you're undershoot and you're not hot enough, this thing will let you know that. So not only is it giving you advice as you're brewing, but it's recording your brew as you go. So that whole aspect of repeatability, you can literally hook this up to a computer and get a real-time view of every step that you took in that particular brew. This is now our true R&D part of our lab program. So we'll be using this to try out new varieties of hops. We'll be using this to try out new varieties of yeast, barley, specialty ingredients, maple syrups, different grades of different flowered honeys, wildflower honey versus a thyme honey. How is that going to change our Midas touch? So this is an opportunity for us to experiment on, again, a scale that isn't going to be too expensive, but is going to yield results that are of the highest caliber, similar to the other investments we made in equipment in our lab. It's neat for me to come full circle and start brewing on the new generation Sabco. So we're really looking forward to using this system not just for experimental batches for R&D and for our laboratory work, but also just getting to remind the consumer that this is our humble origins. We started with this system as the smallest commercial brewery in the country, and now we're among the fastest growing breweries in America. We've been on the Inc. 500 list last few years, and I'm proud of all that growth, but I'm more proud of the fact we've been able to achieve that growth by just sticking to our guns, sticking to that message of off-centered ales for off-centered people, continue to experiment and kind of just following our muse, and having this system back into Dogfish Head is going to allow us to even further explore the outer edges of what beer can be, and we're looking forward to that.